I got a burst of cases that kept me busy. I have no idea why so many people started to cheat at the same time. My plans of going to the gun range and practicing reloading my handgun were sadly put aside in order to deal with the flood of new cases blowing up my work phone. While I was parked outside yet another motel waiting for a cheating husband to come back out, my cell phone rang. I got a bit excited to see Nick's number. As we hadn't talked much since our last case, he admitted through text that he wanted to bring me along for more jobs of his, but wasn't able to find any current open cases a human like myself could help with. The last thing he wanted was to put me in danger. I suspected his jerk of a boss was also against his partner choice and hadn't approved any cases Nick requested. "Hey Nick Nax. What's up?" I asked as I answered his call. The normal long pause followed as Nick tried to figure out if he called the wrong number, and then writing down the new nickname. I honestly didn't know why he wrote things down in a small notebook all the time. I could understand it if he carried them around for work, but I'd seen him write more unrelated and pointless things down than for his cases. "I have a job. It's a minor one, and the corporation isn't even certain that it was caused by supernatural means. Are you available to work?" It sounded as if he was driving while on the phone. I looked at the motel wondering how long this would take. I needed photos to deliver so I could close this case. As much as I wanted to drop everything to work with him, I had to finish my current job. I should be soon. I'm just waiting for a guy for some photos. It could be 10 minutes, but it could be an hour. I admitted. "That is fine. It gives me time to get prepared. When you are ready, send me a message and I can pick you up from your apartment." After that, we said some quick goodbyes and hung up. Nicky sure has changed since I first met him. Either that or I'd adjusted to his monotone voice. I could read his mood even though it sounded as if he didn't have one. He gave me the feeling that he was in a rush. Thankfully, the husband I was waiting for came out with a girl on his arm in under an hour. I took some photos and started to head home. I had already started on an email for the wife, so all I needed to do was add the photos and call Nick saying I was ready to leave. The corporation Nick worked for had a magic way of connecting two doors together. Nick admitted to me he wasn't very good with magic, so he used tools to do it. I only brought my handgun, my wallet, and a light jacket when I opened my door to the unknown. Instead of my apartment hallway, I walked into a hotel room. Nick was by the bed with two bags at his feet. They were overfilled with small squares of paper with writing surrounding circles drawn on them. In his hand was the case folder. I went over and sat in a chair by the window to hear about what we needed to take care of this time. "There have been 4 sexual assaults on the beach in this town in the past week," he started. I expected Nick to show me the photos and evidence, but he kept the folder close to his chest. Whatever was in there was too gruesome to let out into the open. I looked out the window to see the ocean beyond some buildings. It must be useful to go across the county in a second. It must be pretty serious if you're so upset by this, I told him, looking back. He looked a bit alarmed that I could tell how he felt. His face only changed by a twitch of a muscle, but I could still understand how this case bothered him. "It is. 3 of the 4 died from the assault. The last stated a monster attacked her before she went into a coma and it's doubtful she'll wake up again." Nicky was really agitated. He started pacing the room, folder still to his chest and his eyes down. He looked deep in thought and I almost didn't want to bother him. But if I didn't snap him out from his pacing, he might not have been able to focus on the case. "You said there is a chance this might not be a supernatural creature. Why is that?" I asked. Nick stopped, looking a little startled at hearing my voice. He was so deep in thought he honestly forgot I was there. I'd never seen him like this and didn't think anything would affect him to such a degree. That assumption is a little complicated when it comes to creatures of the night. Their culture has continued on without the need of currency. They trade items for what they wish for, or use favors. Due to that, everything has value. Their time, their words, and knowledge. Creatures do not give anything away for free. And aside from taking life for food, they do not simply take. Sexual assaults are rare because of that system. Well, in a sense, they do not go out and attack others in that way, but rather pressure others into an act if needed. I doubt the victims of this case made a trade with a creature, but instead were randomly assaulted by a mystery creature. Nick was still pacing around the room as he spoke. He'd taken out one of his small notebooks and flipped through the pages trying to find something. The case folder was tucked under his arm. I'd already been on a few jobs dealing with monsters, and yet I didn't know anything about their world. I've tried doing my own research only to find out most of what humans know are either unfounded stories or half facts. I've sent texts to Abarash, a woman working at the same place Nick did, but in a different department. She was unable to answer most of my questions because the information was classified. But she was nice enough to confirm vampires are real, and that most of the ones with the well-known weaknesses died out over 100 years ago. She assumed only a handful of them were left. The problem with humans knowing too much about a creature was that they were easily killed, while other creatures that stayed hidden in the shadows remained unharmed, hence all the secrecy. So, they think this wasn't done by a creature because it's not in their nature to do something like this? I asked, trying to get the facts straight. In a way, yes, such terrible crimes do happen from time to time. The corporation made a list of creatures who disregard their culture and would do such a thing. However, these attacks do not match anything listed, Nick replied, not looking up from his notebook. I assumed he was looking through to see if he ever encountered something similar in the past. What happened to those 4 girls must be beyond terrible if he couldn't even consider a human culprit. I thought back to our second case. A serial killer was targeting homeless men and ruined their bodies to the point a creature was suspected. These girls went through an experience far worse than that. So, it's either a creature you've never seen before or a human. Nick finally stopped to collect himself so we could get started on the job now that most of the information about it was covered. He tucked the notebook away and placed the still closed folder on the edge of the bed. It appears those are the only options. The corporation really doesn't believe this was caused by a creature regardless of the signs pointing to that theory. They have only given us 3 days to solve this case before it is passed on to human law agencies. That made me worried. We'd gotten very lucky in our past cases. If we didn't get some leads soon, this case might slip through our fingers. At least Nick had an idea on how to proceed. He motioned for me to pick up one of the bags of papers as he started to tell me his plans. There is a creature we can question about the activity in this town. Depending on what information we receive, we'll cover the beach with these charms as part of a plan designed to lure out the attacker. I was following behind Nick and listening. His pace was a bit quicker than normal, and I could tell he was pretty stressed out. To anyone who didn't know him, he would appear normal, but after working with him for a few jobs, I got the notion he needed a partner on this case to keep him on task. The fact he already had a plan before getting valuable information made me worry. We should learn what we're up against before trying to fight it. After I heard what came out of our upcoming interview with a local supernatural creature, I would speak up to let him know if I thought we needed to slow down. As we walked through the small beachside town, Nick did something else he'd never done before. He paused to take a photo of a carving in one of the bricks on the street. Then he paused again to take a photo of another few carvings set in the stone doorway of a small shop. The art appeared to be 2 lizards in a yin-yang pattern. Do you think this is useful? I asked him after he snapped a photo with his flip phone. No, I just like lizards, he admitted before starting to walk again. He must really like lizards if some very old artwork of them made him stop during a case. I've never seen him have any interest in something besides work. I always assumed he lived in a small apartment with a mattress on the floor and nothing else. If we still worked together around Christmas, I now knew something lizard-related would be a good gift. We stopped by the beach and beside a knee-high concrete wall. I looked around trying to see anything unusual. Some early tourists were on the beach but not in the water because it wasn't warm enough for swimming yet. I didn't see any signs of creatures or monsters. The place looked peaceful, and I would never guess the horrors that happened on that beach recently. Could you buy some onion rings, please? There is a takeout restaurant very close by. The creature I'll call enjoys them the most. Nick handed me some cash, far more for a single order of onion rings. I really hoped the bills were stuck together and he didn't notice instead of him not understanding how money worked. I took the cash but would give back whatever wasn't used. The process of buying the onion rings was quick. The small takeout place smelled fantastic, and if I wasn't on a job, I would have bought dinner for myself. I walked back over to where I left Nick and finally saw what kind of creature he had called over for help. Honestly, I was expecting something else, something a bit more terrifying. Instead, I was looking at a massive bird next to Nick, and I mean massive. It was a full foot taller than Nick. When it turned its head, I could confirm what kind of bird it was. Nick was speaking with a seagull. I started feeling a little scared, even though the bird appeared normal aside from its size. Its eyes were staring at the onion rings in my hand. I placed them on the concrete wall and the seagull wasted no time devouring the food. We sure do trade food for information pretty often. Huh, I said while watching the bird eat. Supernatural creatures are often not able to be seen or to interact with humans. They enjoy the food of the other species, but don't have the means of purchasing it. Nick explained. That made sense. This massive seagull could only get onion rings if someone dropped some, or left them unattended on the beach. It's not as if these monsters could walk into a store to buy snacks even if they stumbled across some money to pay for them. I felt sorry that they didn't have control over getting their favorite food. After the seagull finished eating, Nick started to speak with it, asking questions. It squawked, but somehow he knew what it was saying. He made notes and nodded his head along with the conversation. After a while there was a pause. They'd gotten into a standoff. She won't answer any more questions until we get some more food, Nick told me and went for his wallet. I have enough for some more. I'll be right back. The money left over from the amount Nick had already handed me was more than enough to pay for another order of onion rings. I thought about how creatures lacked the ability to get their own treats and felt sorry for them again. I bought 2 orders and carried them back to where they waited. The seagull's eyes lit up when she saw I was carrying 2 containers instead of 1. She bolted towards me and ate directly from my hands. The force of it nearly toppled me. Because of her size, she could have easily knocked me off my feet. She must have held back a lot as that didn't happen. After both orders were eaten, she spread her wings and let out a happy screech. I swear, her wingspan was longer than a bus. For a seagull, she was pretty threatening. Nick started up his questions again, and this time it appeared to go smoother than before. Finally, he closed his notebook to go over what he learned. This seagull is active in this area during the day. She hasn't noticed any new creatures come along lately. She's also only recently moved into the area. If a creature has been the one behind these crimes, then she assumes it was something that has been here before herself and one more active at night. She's agreed to ask around to find out more information about what manner of creature could be along this beach. She also was the one who spotted the victims before any humans and saw the state they were in. It's her opinion that this was not done by a human but is unaware of what would do such a thing. I nodded along and hoped we could have found out a little bit more. The seagull leaned down to bump her head against my face. I reached up to stroke her feathers, unsure if that was something she was comfortable with. She didn't pull away, and it made me think I'd gained a new friend. At the very least, we had one more person on our side. Or rather, one more creature. She gave us another squawk before she flew off looking for answers. What's next? I asked while watching our bird friend leave. First, we must ensure that no one is on the beach at night. There are better ways of doing so, but this is the only method my level of skill can produce. Nick bent over to take one of the pieces of paper from the bag. He placed it onto the concrete wall and it stuck without any glue. The symbols and circle on the paper glowed white, then the entire thing faded away. These are charms made to give someone within a few feet of it a sense of dread. After he explained what the charm did, I felt my gut started to twist and turn. It wasn't overpowering, rather the feeling you would get looking down a dark alleyway before deciding to use a different path. Nothing that made you stay away outright. Aside from a feeling in your gut, that's pretty useful. I wouldn't stay on a dark beach if I suddenly got this feeling. I looked down at the bags of charms, then back at the beach. It would take a while to cover it all with them, but it needed to be done. If that place was a creature's hunting spot, we needed to make certain there was nothing to hunt. We would be out of luck if it moved on to a different spot to snatch up victims, though. The next part of the plan is placing bait out on the beach. Because we will be the only ones there at night, the creature doing this will be forced to resort to attacking the bait, Nick explained, and I got a bad feeling from that part of the plan. I didn't want someone to be put into danger like that. But we couldn't cover the entire town on our own and needed to bring the creature to us. We need a female agent to come along, right? I mean, I doubt the creature is going to attack one of us, I commented, feeling another sense of dread come along. This time not from the charms, unfortunately. I already called and there are no female agents that can assist in this case. I assume some cosmetics, the right clothing and some perfume shall be enough to fool the creature at a distance in the dark. If that does not work, we can call again tomorrow asking for more help. I frowned, knowing what was going to happen. Because I was the smaller one of the two of us and honestly the more feminine, I was going to be bait. It made me nervous, but I would suck it up so no one else would get hurt by whatever was hunting in the dark. All right, I guess it's worth a shot, I said, as a small sigh escaped my mouth. I can go and buy what we need for the disguise. If you stay here and get started on the charms, I shall join you once I am finished shopping. I trusted Nick knew what he was doing. If not, he would ask some sales clerk for help. I did not want to have that conversation with someone else asking what kind of dresses or frilly shirts they had in my size. I would leave the more embarrassing task for him and do the easier part of the job. I could only hope he didn't pick out a really horrible outfit. We both left to do our tasks. No one paid any attention to me as I started along the beach, placing charms where I thought they would overlap and cover the beach with the sense of dread we wanted. The very few people on the beach left shortly after I placed a charm down, proving they were working. I felt bad ruining the rest of their day, but it needed to be done. The beach ended in rocky cliffs after a while, making it impossible to go further. At least it didn't go on for miles like I feared. We would not have enough charms to cover the beach if that was the case. It took a few hours of walking, but I finally finished my job. Nick called apologizing for how long it took him to go shopping. I could tell the sales ladies gave him a hard time. He was closer to the hotel, so we agreed to meet back at the room. He was already inside when I opened the door. A few outfits were placed on the bed as he was going through a bag of cosmetics looking for something. Honestly, the clothing wasn't as flashy as I expected. I picked up a white blouse made of a silky material. It had frills down the neckline, and I didn't understand how anyone could figure out how to put this shirt on. Looking it over, I noticed a mistake right away. This is too big. I guess I could roll up the sleeves, but this is going to be really baggy on me. The pants look too long too, I said while looking at a pair of black dress pants. Nick stopped looking through his bag and stared up at me. His head tilted as if he didn't understand what I meant. Why did you assume you were going to be the bait? He asked, and I felt like I got hit by a truck. My mouth dropped open as I stared in his direction. Nicky bought all of this for himself. In fact, he planned on dressing up like a woman from the beginning. I'm the most obvious choice. I mean, look at me. I sputtered. He did look at me. After a few times of his eyes glancing up and down, he shook his head. You do not appear more suited for this task than myself. Aside from our height differences, you and I have a fairly similar facial structure, due to the fact either of us could act as bait. It is better if I am the one who does so. You have a long-range weapon. I am more skilled at close-range combat. It is a better idea to bring the creature in my direction and for you to keep a lookout. I felt my face flush a little and I fiddled with the blouse still in my hands. For a very long time I've been ashamed of my appearance. No matter what I did, I never felt as if I would ever be masculine enough. My skeletal structure would never change. I would always have small hands and a petite frame. While I was still in school, I lifted weights and yet still didn't bulk up in any meaningful way. I was flattered Nick didn't see any differences between us. He took the elastic from his hair and started to ruffle it. It was a bit past his ears while down. Besides, I have longer hair and was unable to find a wig. I really do think I'm the better choice, he commented after he pulled out all the cosmetics from the bags. You really don't mind dressing up like a girl? I asked. No. Is there a reason why I should? I shook my head while smiling. Of course, Nick wouldn't see any problem with this. He was pretty easygoing after all. I still didn't know what species Nick was, or where he came from. Wherever he grew up may not have the same kind of culture about gender as humans do. Or maybe he just really didn't care about this sort of thing. When he tossed aside his suit jacket and started to pull at his tie, I decided it was best to give him some privacy. I handed him the blouse and told him I was going to a corner store to get something to drink. I figured because we would be staying awake all night, I could get an energy drink somewhere. He didn't know how long dressing up would take. He agreed to meet me outside once he was done. It took him nearly an hour. I found a bench to sit and wait while catching up on some emails. I really didn't know if this plan was going to work. My confidence on Nick looking believably female in some makeup and a frilly shirt was pretty low. Finally, he came out of the hotel and waved in my direction. I needed to do a double take. We walked towards each other and I really thought he had a twin sister hidden away. The frills on the blouse hid the fact his chest was flat. He picked out a pair of thick-heeled shoes that made him taller, but legs slimmer. A suspicion arose in my gut that this was not the first time he needed to dress like this for a job. There was no way this was the first time he'd put on makeup. It wasn't much, just enough to soften his natural angles to fool someone into thinking he was a part-time model. Jesus. Nicky, you're a smoke show, I said, unable to help myself. He handed me a notebook as I spoke. Head tilted, he took back his notebook to write down what I said and what it meant. Because of the lack of suitable pockets in his pants, he needed me to carry his notebook, his wallet, and his phone. The only thing he kept was Eel. Eel was a sentient blade that collapsed into a small black tube about the size of a lipstick. The sword he normally used was still angry at him and refused to come along that day. After everything I'd seen, a grumpy sword wasn't the strangest thing. I'll need to refrain from speaking. I cannot change my voice, he said, his voice not matching his appearance. A few people going to the bar nearby passed us on the other side of the street. Two men kept their eyes in our direction, confirming Nick's disguise was doing its job. The sun was setting, giving us enough time to head to the beach before dark. We got set up pretty quickly. Nick was a few feet away as I stood near a metal trash barrel. He placed a charm on it and drew a circle in the sand. As long as I stayed in the circle, no one could see or sense me. I would remain there watching Nick. If something approached him, I would fire my weapon as a distraction so he could take it down with his sword. It was a simple plan, but most of the time simple plans worked best. I leaned against the barrel to wait. Nick paced, looking as if he was expecting to meet someone. A while into the night, he said he would pretend to have fallen asleep. This was the best we could think of. I honestly didn't want anything to happen to my partner, but I didn't want anything to happen to another woman on this beach. Keeping watch is a pretty boring job. If I wasn't expecting a monster to appear, I would have nodded off. I felt tense over the thoughts of what we could be dealing with, and whatever had happened to those victims that was too gruesome for Nick to even show me. Thankfully, the moon was full, making it easy to keep watch on Nick. With his white shirt, he was almost a beacon in the night. It made him a very tempting target. Near midnight, my heart leapt into my throat when someone took the bait. A tall man, very muscular man, came walking down the beach towards Nick. My partner didn't appear stressed or gave me any signal to move. They spoke for a few seconds, Nick shaking his head at the man's questions. My heart was beating and I started to sweat. As far as I could tell, this man was human. He didn't look like a threat beyond being a stranger harassing a woman alone in the middle of the night. I made a huge mistake when the man grabbed Nick's arm. I took a few steps forwards, gun raised, and shouted, "Get your hands off," I yelled. They both turned in my direction. Nick's hand flew to get his sword but fumbled when he was unable to get it free from his small pocket. The man wrapped an arm around his waist to lift him off the ground as Nick fought back, but he was shouting something at me. It was far too late. By the time I understood what he was saying, I was knocked off my feet. Something hit my back hard. I was tossed and landed hard into the sand, gasping for air. And my gun flew aside somewhere in the dark, just as I was trying to recover. A huge clawed foot slammed down on my back, forcing me back into the sand, each claw pressing into my clothing, threatening to tear through my flesh. We never even considered the idea that there may be two creatures attacking women on the beach. I had left the circle and given away my location. If I hadn't, I may have distracted them long enough to let Nick get Eel out and even the fight. I thrashed at the sand trying to get free from whatever was pinning me down. Nick was making no progress either. The man that was holding him started to change, his body shifting from human to a terrifying form, his neck long and face flat. A thick tail slammed into the sand behind him, his hands big enough to wrap around Nick's waist clutched my partner tight. These two creatures were some sort of reptile monsters, even if we had known that there were two of them. I never would have guessed nocturnal reptiles were a possibility. Nick's hands were free as he tried to remove the clawed hands from crushing him, spotting a small black shape in the sand. My heart sank when I knew he dropped his weapon. If either one of us could get Eel, then maybe we could salvage this situation. What do we have here? An odd pair, to be sure. A female that smells like a male and a male that smells female. We've never come across such an odd sight before. Isn't that right, brother? A voice from above me spoke. It was raspy and vile. It made my skin crawl. I couldn't see what was standing on my back, but I assumed it looked like the creature who still held Nick. With a huge claw, it grabbed his face to get a better look as Nick tried biting the scaled fingers. I do not mind it, male or female. I am not picky, however. I do dislike when they kick and scream. Stay still or else my brother shall gut your friend. My mouth watered as bile rose to my throat. Nick went from thrashing and fighting for his life to going completely still when my life was threatened. I needed to do something. Anything. I could not let this beast hurt Nick in any way. I hated how weak I was. And I hated the fact Nick looked willing to sacrifice himself for my sake. Whatever horrible acts those women went through, he would let it happen to himself in order to save me. Just thinking about it made my stomach lurch again, unable to stop myself. I got sick in the sand, my face so close I choked on both my own vomit and the sand kicking back up in my nose. Ah. Don't die just yet. What a fragile thing you creatures are, the monster above me said. I felt the foot be lifted from my back. He wanted me alive so he could assault me in the same way his brother was going to assault Nick. I was sure of that, even in my miserable state. I refused to let the beasts have their way. The moment I was free, I darted forward, snatching up Eel. It sprang forth ready to cut. I let it guide my hand as the beast that attacked me reached forward, trying to regain control. I slashed a finger off as he reached over, trying to take hold. I wanted nothing more than to save Nick, but I needed to deal with one monster at a time. To my horror, the lizard creature grabbed its finger to place it back on his hand with a wide grin. It healed right away. This thing was far too powerful. I needed to cut his head off or else I wouldn't stand a chance. For a moment, things started to look up as a sound of wings came from the sky. The seagull we had spoken with earlier came diving down and started to attack the lizard I was facing. She was either paying us back for that extra order of onion rings, or she just really wanted to protect us. I turned, sword in hand, ready to get Nick free. I ran, gaining traction on the sand. It was only a few steps, but I got there too late. The lizard reached a clawed hand and covered Nick's entire face. He kicked, trying to get loose, each slam of a heel a desperate attempt for his life. The creature let out a screeching laugh as it brought its claws down my partner's face, mauling it and digging into his throat. I screamed and brought the sword down on the monster's arms, severing them. Both arms and Nick fell to the ground. I heard an awful noise behind me as the other lizard grabbed a hold of the seagull's wing and broke it. He tossed her aside just as I was facing his brother. I rammed the sword into his gut, trying to slice him in half. I was unable to move the sword as his head came down and teeth clamped down into my shoulder. I was pried off and tossed aside to the second monster. In one swift movement, The beast kicked my face hard enough to break my nose and knock me out for a few minutes. I woke up, face throbbing and mouth full of blood. The seagull was off to the side, helpless. I nearly cried for her. She'd done some damage to one lizard. An eye was missing and cuts lined his body. They were slowly healing as he picked up his brother's arms to reattach them. My eyes fell on Nick and I choked on the blood in my throat and my own tears. I could hear his raspy breaths. But with his face so badly torn apart he was going to die unless I saved him. And yet that beast still grabbed a hold of the blouse to rip it off after his arms healed. By some miracle I landed near my gun, without thinking. I grabbed it and fired it into their bodies until it clicked empty. They jumped as if being stung by wasps, but overall didn't appear harmed. You entitled pricks, don't you fucking dare touch him. I screamed frantically trying to find where Eel had ended up. Entitled, yes. We are. You humans have forgotten what we have done for you. You have forgotten your promise. The larger lizard, which I assumed was the older brother, took 2 steps and covered the distance between us. He knocked my hand aside and wrapped a set of claws around my throat. I fumbled in my pockets feeling for any weapon only to find the pen Nick handed me with his notebook. I slammed it into the scaled finger but he didn't even notice. We have been protecting this town for a countless amount of years. No plagues, no fires. A long life for the humans who live here. We are gods. All we ask is for 1 wife every year for this service. Think of that. 1 sacrifice for the lives of hundreds of others, but for years and years. This has not happened. You all have forgotten your half of the bargain as we slaved away ensuring ours. We are tired of this disrespect and shall take what we are owed. His voice was deep and so hostile it chilled my bones. His grip tight but not enough to stop my air supply. What we are owed. The younger brother chimed in with a terrible laugh. Nick isn't human. You can't, I started, but the claws dug in, cutting off my words. These 2 had already decided what they were going to do to us. They didn't want to give me a chance to reason a way out. I needed to think of something. I couldn't let my partner go through this. I looked around as if the way out was going to appear. While the lizards were distracted, the seagull was hobbling around. She'd spotted Eel collapsed in the sand. I mentally urged her to keep moving, somehow. If she could get it to me, I might have a chance. Brother, this one isn't to my taste. You may have both tonight, the larger one said, and his brother looked excited. I do, thank you, but please kill that one first. It looks like one who will keep fighting. And although I am not that picky, that is the only thing I dislike. They both snickered as if they had heard the funniest joke ever. The seagull picked up Eel carefully in her beak. Just a little bit closer and I might be able to save us. If I could just keep him distracted for a few more seconds then. I felt my body be tossed around again, the seagull making a sound of distress, dropping Eel in the process. I was unable to stand up as the whip-like tail of the lizard smashed into my face, making my head explode in pain. Blood splattered across the sand, reaching the younger lizard near Nick. I couldn't sit up. My head was swimming and blood pouring down my face. I think I said Nick's name but wasn't certain because of the pain I was in. I thought it was over. Logically, we both should have died, and I hoped it was before that lizard got its filthy hands on me. I felt the sand start to shift under my back. As my vision blurred, I heard the lizard cackling until it suddenly stopped, groggy and fighting back pain. I half sat up trying to see what was happening. Somehow, Nick was standing, his face dripping blood and limp against his chest. For some reason, sand was being drawn to his feet. The lizard stopped, confused about what was going on. We all watched, stunned as Nick's face healed, leaving no blood behind. He still didn't raise his head as if he wasn't fully awake. This wasn't my partner. That faraway look in his eyes was not the Nicky I knew. Something else was behind those eyes, and I felt a wave of fear cut through the pain. More sand started to get pulled under his feet. The lizards didn't know what was going on, but I understood it a little. For some reason, Nick was absorbing everything around him. He had told me before that he could absorb dead supernatural creatures and objects made by supernatural means in order to recover energy, but he'd never absorbed anything natural before. He started to sink as the sand around his feet disappeared, creating a perfect circular hole. A strong wind picked up as more sand blew in his direction, as if a black hole had appeared where he stood trying to suck everything in. His hair started to change. Instead of its usual pinkish-orange tint, it turned into a darker red that almost glowed in the night. The younger lizard got brave and cracked a smile. "Oh, what a strange one you are. I'll be glad to take you for myself," before his older brother shouted out a warning. The lizard creature reached out a clawed hand to grab Nick. It never reached him. The hand disappeared and the lizard looked shocked as his body started to fold in on itself. He didn't even let out a scream as he morphed into something else, that massive body twisting until it formed, well, a lizard. A large one, but just a regular lizard you might find in specialty pet stores. The seagull let out a noise as she fluttered over towards me. She tried protecting me with one wing as Nick moved in our direction. He ran past, directly towards the other lizard. He let out a short-lived scream before twisting and turning into a normal-looking lizard like his brother. It scurried off, finding his sibling as they sat next to each other. I could tell my seagull friend didn't want me to go near Nick. She squawked in protest as I got out from under her wing and towards my partner. "Nicky," I asked, my voice ruined from the night's events. For a moment, it appeared as if he was going to do something to me. His hand reached out as if he was ready to change my form the same way he changed the lizard's. Just before his fingers touched my face, he collapsed, his hair returning to normal. I caught him by reflex, and we both fell to the ground. I sat holding my partner and stared off into the dark beach. He barely appeared to be breathing, which worried me. Neither lizards made any move towards us. One placed a head on the back of the other, both ready for a nap. After everything, I did the only thing I was able. I called Abarash with Nick's phone, asking her to get some sort of medical help out to us. I wasn't aware of how much time passed until help finally arrived. Nick was taken first and placed on a stretcher to be taken away. I wanted to go with him, but Abarash asked me to stay behind to explain what happened. They treated my seagull friend, and 2 agents wrangled the lizards inside a set of dog carriers and looked over them. In a daze, I sat and told Abarash what happened as best I could while she treated my nose. She gave me just enough painkillers so that I could remain somewhat sharp. She also didn't have any magic methods of treating my injuries except those that would knock me out for about a day to recover. Healing supernatural creatures was easy. Humans didn't take to magic very well, and most treatments would overload their bodies. She listened patiently but had a puzzled look on her face for most of my story. She excused herself for a moment to speak with the agents who took the lizards. When she returned, she looked even more confused. "What kind of power did Nick use on those 2? I asked her, not knowing what the hell happened. "I don't know. Nick doesn't have any powers like that. Or at least, we thought he didn't," she replied with some concern in her voice. "Knowing he's stronger than you assumed shouldn't be a big deal, right? And what about those lizards? Are they going to change back and cause problems?" I asked, trying to focus on something besides the pain in my face. She looked deep in thought and played with one of her chunky gold necklaces. Even though I worked on some cases, I wasn't an agent, and most things about their world was kept classified. She was debating on what she could tell me and how to say it. "You see, supernatural creatures have an internal energy source. Humans do not. It's the reason why creatures can use magic, and humans can only use magic if they borrow the power from something else. A creature's strength is based on how big of an energy source they have. If it is ever depleted, the creature dies. Nick has a very small source, and honestly, he's one of our weakest agents. I'm telling you this because those lizards over there are just normal lizards. They have no magic or power inside them whatsoever." I looked at her and back towards the dog carriers, not understanding what that statement really meant. "Can't monsters turn into other things though? The one looked human before he turned into a lizard." I pointed out, "They can change forms, but the magic is still inside them. Even if they get their powers sealed, it's still there. Those lizards are just normal. People won't believe what you said happened because nothing in this world can take away a supernatural creature's magic without killing it. They didn't have their magic sealed. It's just not there. Not even our Silver King can do something like that." She sounded worried, and I didn't like it. Nick had an unknown power, and not only that, but one that no creature should be able to use. I didn't know what that would mean for his future. My body tensed, and I felt as if I might get sick again. "Then, what does this all mean?" I said, my voice coming out weak. "I'll have this case classified. Only the ones involved in Anchor shall know about it. I hate the man, but he is Nick's boss. I'll have to kick his ass when I see him though. His job is to pick cases suitable for his agents to go on. He was the one who approved you 2 to do this one. He should have refused Nick's request. Clearly this was something way beyond your skills. Whatever was attacking those women was a creature we had yet to encounter, making it very dangerous. Far too powerful for Nick and yourself to handle. The fact you're both alive is a miracle, and I'm proud of you. As for the rest, I think you need to take a bit of a break. What happened tonight was a big mess, and it might not hit you right away, but I think the entirety of what could have happened is going to sink in at some point. When it does, you need time to let yourself recover from it." Abarash was thinking way further in the future than I was. I knew what happened hadn't fully hit me yet. When it did, I would be a mess, but I didn't expect someone to think I should take the time to deal with it instead of pushing through like most people in my life recommended. I nodded, feeling numb in the moment, and blamed it on the painkillers she gave me. "I'm sending you home. I'll give you updates on Nick, but please take a break. I'll write the report for you, so don't worry. If you need to talk, please call me. I might not be your boss, but I am always here to take care of my coworkers." My chest felt slightly warm from her words. I'd never come across people as gentle and nice as her and Nick. True to her word, she got me back to my apartment with some pills to take and go to bed right after. I was asleep for nearly a full day because of whatever magic medicine they gave me. It healed my broken nose, but my eyes were still black and a scar ran across my face. It wasn't too bad. We could have died or worse. I soon received the news that Nick had woken up with no memory of what had happened. He was frantic, nearly raising his voice and asking where I was. They got him settled down and he was forced on bed rest because he was very weak after he woke up. I was tempted to ask Abarash for hourly updates on his condition but knew that was too much. I just asked for her to tell me if anything changed. 3 days passed and Abarash was right. What happened finally caught up to me. I was so distraught thinking about what nearly happened to both Nick and I. I stopped eating for the first time in my life. I put off work until I could return to a normal emotional state. What helped the most was that Nick called. I fumbled with my phone, desperate to hear from him. Snickerdoodle. Are you feeling all right? My voice trembled, and I wondered if I would cry if he said he wasn't doing well. I'm fine. A little tired, but I'll be going home tomorrow. I stole my phone to call you. I'm glad. I was really worried about you. Your face got really messed up and I stopped, unable to keep talking about that night. I'm sorry to have worried you. I am uncertain of how we made it out alive, but I was told you fought very bravely. I wish I had never put you in that position though. His voice trailed off and I heard some noise on his end. He must in a busy clinic. When I took this job, I knew the risks. I would never blame him for getting hurt, but I was a little bit angry at him for something else. Nikki. The next time someone is holding me hostage, you can't shut down like that. I'm the weaker part of this team. Your fighting skills are way beyond my own. If it happens again, you need to fight if you're able. I know you'll protect me, but it can't come at the cost of your body. There was a long silence and I didn't know if he was still on the other end of the line. I might have crossed a line. I should have been grateful Nick was ready to sacrifice himself for my safety, but I didn't want that to ever happen again. I would rather us both go down fighting. Thank you, Nick finally said. What for? No reason. I just felt like saying it. I couldn't reply. Abarash's voice came from his side of the phone. She'd spotted him awake and took his phone away so he could get some more rest. She told me a quick goodbye and hung up. I looked at my cell hoping I didn't get him into too much trouble. One more case was closed. We'd gotten out by the skin of our teeth. In the future more cases would come up. I wasn't going to let this one stop us from accepting them. Nicky yet again protected me and I really needed to pay him back, no matter what it took. We would keep working together doing the smaller, yet very dangerous cases no one else appeared interested in. Somewhere in the world, some supernatural creature was harming a helpless victim, but at least on one beach, a set of lizards was never going to terrorize another person ever again.